Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Opposition People's Democratic Party makes move to ask Supreme Court to review its judgment on the presidential election, as ruling APC also seeks reversal of verdict on Bayelsa and Zamfara governorship polls. Inspector General of Police orders investigation into the death of footballer Tiamiu Kazim as Shagam residents' peaceful protest over his death turned violent. President Buhari approves constitution of National Humanitarian Coordination Commission to be co-chaired by Humanitarian Affairs Minister and the NSA. And the World Health Organization warns of a possible global coronavirus pandemic, says the world should do more to prepare. Plus, we have business, sports, news from Abuja, the FCT, and later international news from our London studios. Now, our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from the respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms, Apple TV, Android TV, Fire, and Roku TV. And back in the southwest, normalcy has returned to Shagamu in Ogun State. And this is after violent protests by residents over the death of a 28-year-old Remo Stars Football Club defender, Tiamiu Kazim, in controversial circumstances on Saturday. Although eyewitnesses claim that 3 people were killed during the violence, the state's police command denied any casualty before, during, and after the protests. Family members of the footballer are demanding justice for their son, whose death, they say, has ended a chapter.
The aftermath of the protest by residents of Shagamu, when they took to the street to demonstrate the loss of a promising young man, Tiamiu Kazim, whose death is still shrouded in controversy. The police said he was killed by a hit-and-run vehicle while trying to evade arrest. Unfortunately, Tiamiu is not alive to give his side of the story. Monday's protest allegedly claimed some lives, but the police says no life was lost in the peaceful protest that turned violent.
A group of people gathered themselves together and they started protesting, and they were addressed by prominent indigenous of Shagamu, including the former governor of the state, Otunbagbenga Daniel, the Akarigbo of Remo Land himself, and they were dispersed peacefully and they left. But some disgruntled elements gathered themselves together and they started advancing towards the police station with the aim of burning down the police station. But
a visit to the family house of the footballer, whose death sparked the protest, revealed that family members are still in pensive mood and are demanding justice.
There's no evidence of criminality on my son before they kill him.
The family also want his remains to be released to them so that they can give him a befitting burial. While the family is demanding justice, the police authority has recommended the police officer linked to the death of Tiamiu Kazim for dismissal and an arraignment in a competent court of justice for him to face the full weight of the law.
In the meantime, the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, has ordered an investigation into the circumstances surrounding the death of the footballer Kazim in Shagamu, Ogun State on the 22nd of February. Mr. Adamu today asked the Deputy Inspector General of Police in charge of the Forces Criminal Investigations Department, Anthony Ogbizi, to immediately take over the investigation while reviewing daily reports of major crime incidents across the country. The IGP also commiserated with the family and friends of Mr. Kazim, calling for calm with an assurance that any person found culpable will be made to face justice. Let's head over to our Abuja studios where we have more stories with Markwe Ogun Yusuf. Good to see you, Markwe.
Good to see you as well, Millicent. We welcome our viewers to our Abuja studios, and we begin with some bright news. Nigeria's gross domestic product grew by 2.55% year-on-year in real terms in the fourth quarter of 2019, the best since the country came out of recession in 2016. According to figures released by the National Bureau of Statistics, aggregate GDP in the fourth quarter of 2019 stood at 39.58 trillion naira in nominal terms. Our business correspondent Chimezi Obiwagu reports.
The strong fourth quarter 2019 growth rate is the highest quarterly growth performance since the 2016 recession. Overall, this resulted in annual 2019 real growth rate of 2.27% compared to 1.91% in 2018. For this period, the oil sector contributed 7.32% to total real GDP, up from figures in the corresponding period of 2018, but down compared to the preceding quarter. Quarter on quarter, the oil sector recorded a growth rate of minus 20.87% in fourth quarter 2019. On an annual basis, oil recorded 4.59% growth in 2019, higher compared to 0.97% recorded in 2018. However, the oil sector's contribution to real GDP in 2019 was 8.78%.
Each time I talk about statistics coming from the MBS, yes, as much as we can rely on them, but I don't think they're as holistic as they should be, because the MBS, I do not, believe has that, capacity to be able to drill it down. Most of the statistics that they also generate are not generated from primary sources. That's also very important. And so when you are, doing a proper analysis on how this is impacting on the development of a country, I think it has to be a little bit more holistic. We need to be able to drive it down, to the subnational levels.
The non-oil sector, on the other hand, grew by 2.26% in real terms during the reference quarter, lower by minus 0.44 percent points compared to the rate recorded in the same quarter of 2018. This sector was driven during the fourth quarter of 2019 mainly by information and communication, agriculture, financial and insurance services, as well as manufacturing.
The question for investors is what is the outlook of these sectors in 2020 and beyond? What is, the government trying to do to actually, support these sectors? Now, in the agri sector, we continue to see a bit of government support in that area. The CBN is giving, all kinds of interventions. Has created all sorts of intervention funds to drive credit into the agri sector and also to bolster performance.
As impressive as these latest figures may look, the challenge before the fiscal authorities is how to translate this growth into better standard of living for Nigerians. Chimeze Obiwagu, Channels Television News.
Now let's get some more insight into how those latest GDP figures, and we're now being joined by Mr. Paul Alaje, a senior economist with SPM Professionals. You're welcome to the news at 10.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, 1.9% in 2018 to 2.27% in 2019. Now, that must be cherry news.
Yeah, cherry news, indeed. It's better than where we were coming from. We're getting closer to population growth rate of 2.7 to 3%, depending on the authority we want to use. Either we want to use National Population Commission or we want to consider UNDP. Be it as it may, it's better than where we were. We are now on above 2% as against what IMF projected at 2.1%. But when you look at this holistically among African countries, 15 countries were selected. The first among them was Rwanda. Rwanda grew by 11.9% in the same period. And countries that are very close to Nigeria, talking about the Republic of Benin, it grew at 7.6%. Nigeria Republic, very close to us, grew at 6.1%. Of these countries, Nigeria only grew at last quarter at 2.55%. Now, while it is good where we were coming from, it is not sufficient because we still have a lot of lag, a lot of gap compared to our population growth. And when you grow at your population growth, you have seen not grown, it is net growth, which is, zero growth, I beg your pardon, because your population growth rate minus your economic growth rate, you must have, to a large extent, extra from your economic growth rate, which means you are producing more than the people that are consuming in layman language.
Okay, but we have the strongest growth since, I mean, this is the strongest quarter growth we've seen in a while. Does it mean then that we're fully out of recession, or is our growth still very fragile?
Nigeria has been out of recession, officially speaking, when you talk about the theory of it. Now, what Nigerians want to see perhaps is development and seeing that this growth we've said is 1.0, 2.0. We're beginning to see that this growth is now having impact on the people. So when you talk about recession, you're simply talking about theoretical approach of having two negative growth. And once you have positive growth, you are completely out of recession. But with this economic growth start impacting the people, how you feel that, how you check that impact is what is this on population, what is it on inflation, I beg your pardon, what is it on unemployment. Unemployment is still 23.1% of the labor force. And what is it saying on inflation? Inflation has gone beyond 12%. We are now at 12.13%. So when you look at all of these, you see that, yes, we need to sustain this growth for a long time before it starts having impact directly on the people.
Is it sustainable when you look at the fact that government policies also changed towards the end of last year? We had border closure. We also have VAT going up this year. For you, do you think this growth is sustainable?
The biggest challenge is not even border closure. Neither is it inflation. The biggest challenge is coronavirus. And I'll say this to you. Most of the business that happen in Nigeria are imported. One of their biggest trading partner is China. Now, coronavirus in China is not a good thing, morally speaking. But economically speaking, countries like Japan and Thailand have positioned themselves because come April, some of these manufacturers will relocate from China and be looking for where country of destination to continue their business because economics must continue. It must happen. Now, is Nigeria prepared, particularly for what is happening in China right now? Because you could see reports coming from China shows that the economic growth rate, GDP growth rate in China continue to reduce because of coronavirus and not having solution to coronavirus. So is this sustainable for Nigeria? I don't think so. It's not sustainable for now. We might still have this growth very slow. It might fall at some point. It might increase at some point. But are we going to have that double digit like we see in Rwanda, 9%? I don't think so. There are things Rwanda have done. When investors want to invest in countries with a huge population, they consider which country will they go to. They look at security issues, they look at government policy consistency, and so on and so forth. Nigeria have not made those policies yet. But so it's not for us to be sad. We should be happy that we're better than where we were before. But government and authorities need to do more so that we can get this growth beyond population growth rate.
It's a fine place to leave it. We have to thank you, Mr. Paul Alaje. He's a senior economist with SPM Professionals.
Thank you so much for having me.
When the News at 10 returns, the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning proposes new incentives to boost Nigeria's capital market. That's on Business News. Do join us again.